So as seems to be the norm these days, I didn't plan on making this video. I actually had something fun planned for this week that I'm now having to push back yet again due to predatory business practices once again rearing their ugly heads in the gaming industry. So if you've been living under a rock, here's the situation. Unity, an engine used by many both AAA and indie devs, has made some changes to their monetization policy, and needless to say, they aren't looking too good. Said changes make it so that all game developers using their engine, regardless of how long their games have existed, must now pay a fee every time someone installs their game. Now supposedly, this is only going to be for first-time installs, but more on this in a bit. Not only is this move extremely predatory towards all developers, but it's especially damaging towards small indie studios. Now many have been quick to point out that the change is currently only set to affect those devs making over $200K a year. But here's the thing. $200K may sound like a lot, but in reality, if you're even a mid-sized indie studio, that is basically nothing if you have more than one employee to pay. In the US, the average game developer earns from a pretty wide range of between about $50,000 to $100,000 a year. So on the low end, $200K is just the cost to pay for 4 employees. When businesses can't pay their employees, and especially when businesses lose profits, they pass the costs on to the consumer. That means you, me, and anyone else who wants to buy a game made in the Unity engine. They're basically doing what, unfortunately, loads of software developers have been doing for years, by putting down a forced subscription service, only this time it's in a historically unprecedented and extremely invasive way. This change is going to be disastrous for the entire gaming industry. Like I said before, when developers make less money, to make up the difference, the cost almost always gets passed on to the consumer. We've been seeing this a lot over the last couple of years, really the last decade, especially in AAA gaming. Though it's not an excuse and far from the only reason, it is part of why we see so many microtransactions and day one DLCs in nearly every modern game. Investors, publishers, CEOs, and shareholders have gotten increasingly greedy, demanding larger and larger cuts of the final product. And with the general direction of the economy, as well as production prices skyrocketing over the past couple of years, now having this on top of all of that is not a good sign of things to come. Prior to recently, indie games were relatively safe from all this nonsense, but not anymore with this move. There's also another potential problem here, and this one's going to directly affect gamers. Not only will we see a reduction in quality and an increase in price, but I suspect we'll also see more egregious DRM practices as well. If developers are going to be charged more money for every installation, don't be surprised if you start seeing things pop up like what EA tried to do in the early 2010s, with certain games only being able to be installed a certain number of times on a certain number of machines. Or maybe we'd even see more games move toward a subscription model. We'd also likely see even more microtransactions as developers, especially small ones, struggle to make up the cost by cutting content and locking it behind an additional paywall. This isn't even considering what will happen to games on the free-to-play side of things. It's an objective fact that free-to-play games often get significantly more installs than paid games due to the extremely low barrier of entry. Free-to-play games are already a hellhole loaded with microtransactions and content locked behind paywalls, and I really don't think anyone needs them getting much worse than they already are. And then there's the fact that if this goes through and is allowed to continue, we have no idea what kind of other scummy practices will follow suit. We've seen in the past couple of years how when one company does something that makes them profits, no matter how scummy it is, other companies will copy them just to make a quick buck. If all this wasn't dark enough, let me share with you the frightening potential outcome we could see depending on how far this gets pushed. If games get so expensive to produce and sell so well that Unity bankrupts all these small indie studios, then there will be no more indie games, no more games without microtransactions. Let me explain. Ravenfield is a pretty popular game that is available fairly cheap. With a virtually endless amount of mods, I would argue it's one of, if not the best sandbox shooter on the market right now. It's made with Unity, just like games like Brass Brigade, Worldbox, Total Tank Simulator, and many other fantastic indie games. Great indie games that have no monetization other than their initial buy-in cost, which, as I mentioned earlier, is sure to increase with this new payment model. It's very possible, especially with older or free-to-play games that do sell well and have a limited or simply insufficient monetization system, that those games will not only be unprofitable for the developers behind them, but will also cost the studios money just to exist simply because they use the Unity engine. When other companies take note of how much revenue this generates, I guarantee you they will follow suit, which will force massive numbers of these small studios that create these great games to shut down altogether, stop selling certain games, or just it will prevent companies from even wanting to make games in the first place with the lack of accessibility, with Unity basically no longer being a viable option. All we'll have to play is the same recycled garbage Call of Duty, Fortnite, whatever clones that AAA developers shove out every year now. There will be an extremely limited at best or none at worst in the way of genuinely creative, innovative, and fun games that we see from some of the best studios out there in the indie scene. In my opinion, what Unity is doing should be illegal. There is no upside to this. In no way will developers, the games themselves, or players benefit from this at all. Gaming as a whole will be the one to suffer, while the greediest people at the top are the only ones that have anything to gain from this. But it gets worse. This whole thing adds to the increasingly dangerous precedent that I've noticed has gained more and more traction over the last couple of years, and that is the idea that you own nothing. DRM has gotten more prevalent in games. Social media platforms actively work with governments to silence and censor those that disagree with them. Taxes are being raised that if you don't pay, you could literally lose your house even if you own it free and clear. This type of control over an individual's property by governments and corporations is nothing new, but over time it's ever increasing with a disturbing amount of mainstream acceptance. So many people are quick to claim they're a private company, they can do whatever they want, while also backing restrictive big government policies that screw over the little guy and line the pockets of political donors. So this isn't some angry, jaded person on the internet rambling about just video games because he has nothing better to do. This is far bigger and far more important than just that. This is an attack on our rights as individuals to own private property, be it physical or intellectual. This is another clear example of corporations just bullying people into doing whatever they want for their own financial gain, and individual rights be damned. At the end of the day, I don't know what the solution to this is. Boycotting Unity-made games is only going to hurt small developers that put genuine passion and effort into making some great things, so that certainly isn't it. Complaining about it online will certainly help spread awareness about the issue, but I don't think that'll do much by itself. I think the issue here with Unity is it isn't a game series or a TV show you can just not watch or play to boycott or protest. It's in many cases the very framework and foundation that a lot of games, again, especially indie games, use. And there's no way to get around that. It will significantly increase the barrier to entry for people who want to make their own games. And it'll make it so the only people able to do it are the largest of megacorporations, like Microsoft, for example. I honestly think there needs to be some kind of law or legislation to block Unity or any other company from doing this. Make these contracts solidified and outlaw the idea that they can change it years later. But that's my take on all this. A bit of an impromptu video again. If you like this, leave a like on it, and while I don't normally ask you guys to share it around, please do this time. Talk about this and create a conversation around it and maybe suggest some solutions in the comments below, because I'm at a loss of what to do here. I am Broken Circle, and as always, I thank you for watching. Have a great day, and stay safe. Goodbye.